When Joe Biden took office more than 2 years ago now, he asked nearly all of the United States attorneys from the Trump era to resign. This is a typical process for a new president. But Joe Biden went out of his way to leave two in particular of those federal prosecutors in place. One was John Durham. Yes, you've heard a lot about that guy, who was conducting a special counsel investigation into the origins of the Russia probe. You may also remember that politically charged investigation basically ended with a whimper. And the other was the U.S. Attorney for the District of Delaware, a man named David Weiss, we've heard a lot about in recent weeks. He was investigating Biden's own son. That's why he kept him. Now, I remember this well. I was working on the Biden transition team when these decisions were made, and it was not exactly the easier option. I mean, no one in the Biden orbit knew what either prosecutor would decide to do. But the point was that the investigative work of the Department of Justice and these attorneys must be independent, and it was important to let them finish their work. That is how the system is supposed to work. Well, last month, U.S. Attorney Weiss brought charges, 2 misdemeanor tax offenses and a felony firearm offense. All 3 stem from a time while Hunter Biden was battling drug addiction, something, by the way, millions of Americans deal with, either themselves, family members, or others in their life. And he was very open about it. He wrote a memoir that he published in 2021 and talked all about it. Weiss also announced that he has secured a plea deal where Hunter Biden would plead guilty to the tax charges and enter into what is called a pre-trial diversion agreement on the gun charge. Today, Hunter Biden appeared in federal court for a hearing where he was expected to formally enter that plea. That's what everybody thought was going to happen. But in what felt like a twist, the judge did not approve the deal, instead giving the prosecutors and defense teams 30 days to hash out the agreement. Hunter Biden then pleaded not guilty. Now, while all of this was going on today, President Biden remained pretty out of the public eye. He has maintained a strict distance from any appearance of involvement in his son's case, any appearance at all, or the processes of the Department of Justice. Now, whatever you think of these relatively minor offenses by Hunter Biden, he is someone who does not hold public office, simply happens to be son of the president, and the Biden administration has played this exactly by the book. Now, just to put this full picture for you, imagine just for a second that a child of the former president, a child of Trump, was under investigation by a prosecutor appointed by a Democratic president. Do you think there is any world in which he would have let that person keep their job, or frankly, even refrain from personally attacking them? If you have any doubt, remember, Donald Trump attempted to co-opt the Department of Justice to help him steal the election, and he has repeatedly targeted prosecutors for simply doing their jobs. Yesterday, the former president commanded his foot soldiers in Congress to immediately take steps to stop the DOJ from prosecuting him. Just this morning, he was hollering on his Truth Social page about prosecutorial misconduct and predicting he will have the trial of the century. So, yes, Joe Biden and Donald Trump have starkly different views of the independence of the Department of Justice, and that's important to remember as we look at history. Claire McCaskill served as a Democratic senator of Missouri, and she joins me now. Claire, you have a legal background, a political background, and we're all trying to make sense of what happened today. So let me start with this. Is it unusual for a judge not to accept a plea deal like this? Because it felt kind of surprising to everybody watching it.
Well, there were some things in this plea deal that were unusual, and that's what the judge focused on, both the scope of the immunity, which is not unusual for that to get hashed out in detail, but also the fact that what they did in this plea deal, typically if you're on a diversion program, if you violate the terms of the diversion, in this instance, either break the law or use drugs or have a gun, then that is handled by people through the Department of Justice, people that are assigned to the diversion program and monitor people who are on diversion. They were worried that Trump could get reelected and decide he would revoke Hunter Biden's diversion without cause. And so
they wouldn't be able to maintain. So they wouldn't be able to maintain
exactly
the parts of the plea if Trump is elected.
Exactly. And so what they did in this case, they said they wanted the judge to be the arbiter as to whether or not he had violated the terms of diversion. And she said, whoa, wait a minute. That's not my job. Yeah. I am not somebody who is the arbiter of whether someone has violated diversion. That's an executive branch function. So I think that's the main thing they're going to work out. And frankly, they'll probably work out whether or not he's got immunity from FARA, which is the federal lobbying statute. And I think once those two things get worked out, I think the plea would go forward as had been previously planned.
So that's what happens. They gave 30 days for them to work it out. Is that primarily what happens over the next 30 days? And do they reconvene again, or what happens next?
Well, they have to come to an agreement as to the scope of immunity, and they have to come up with a way to monitor his diversion that does not involve the judge directly. And that's what I believe they will spend their time on trying to work out. If they can't, then there would be no plea deal. He has been charged. It would be up to the prosecutors to decide whether to charge him with more cases or to go forward on what they had already charged him and have a trial. It would be fairly unusual for someone who has paid all of their taxes and penalties to go to trial on a case, on a tax case. Typically, if someone pays them all plus penalties, particularly under circumstances where they admit they were impaired with an addiction at the time, that would be unusual to put to a jury. You don't know how excited. I mean, frankly, the Republicans want to do away with the IRS, so I don't know why they're worried about paying taxes. They want to make sure nobody pays taxes. And I don't think Trump's somebody. He used to say anybody who paid taxes was a sucker.
Well, you gave me a perfect transition to ask you to put your political hat now on, Clara, because what I'm curious about is what you'll be watching over the next couple of days. I mean, Hunter Biden is a favorite target of Republicans in the House, Republicans from the Trump wing of the party and others. What accusations and arguments do you think they're going to make, given this didn't go exactly as planned today?
Well, they're going to keep doing what they've been doing. They are going to try to indict a father for loving his son who has been addicted to drugs and or alcohol, and without evidence of the father doing anything other than loving that son. And that, I think, doesn't fly with most of the American people. It may fly within that small calcified circle of the Trumpers who want to believe that somehow Joe Biden was involved in nefarious dealings, but there's no evidence. And believe me, if there was evidence, Durham, who was left in place, as you pointed out, by President Biden, would have found it. And certainly Weiss, who was left in place by President Biden, would have found it. And I do not believe for a minute that either one of those federal prosecutors that had the resources of DOJ at their disposal would have found evidence, if it was there, that would have shown any problem of Joe Biden. So this is a dog that won't hunt. And they have selective amnesia, by the way. They have selective amnesia. I mean, I can make a very strong argument politically that the only reason Donald Trump is president is because of DOJ and them inappropriately issuing a letter 10 days before the election about Hillary Clinton's emails.
You wouldn't
I don't think he ever would have been elected without
You wouldn't
it.
be the only one who makes that argument. Well, a dog that won't hunt. I love that phrase. Love a good Clara McCaskillism. Thank you so much for joining me with both your political and your legal hat on tonight.